passive range of motion. Very simple test. The key to me, the most important thing is that you understand what's happening. And if you get that, it makes it easy. With me?
Yes.
Okay. So, Romberg test. Have you heard of Romberg test or Romberg sign? That's good. What is it testing?
Dorsal column. DCMM.
So it's really a lot of, and this is good. I don't think I heard one person say cerebellum. So seriously, I'd say probably 50% of the docs out there say cerebellum. It has little to nothing to do with the cerebellum. This is how you know this. A person with cerebellar problems, a tumor, a stroke, infarct, or chronic alcoholism tends to goober up the cerebellum. You may not have heard of this, or you may have. There's something called cerebellar ataxia. It's a gait. And it's a wide-based gait where the patient, depending on how severe their disease is, if they're really severe, they'll have to kind of look down, visual reference, and they'll have to have a wide-based gait because they'll walk like they're drunk. They'll walk like they're drunk. Eyes open. It's the cerebellum, so it doesn't matter that their eyes are open. So eyes open, you do a Romberg test. There are some versions that say put the arms out in front of you, some to the side. It does not matter. At my station, it was arms at the side or arms at the front, acceptable variants. The idea to putting the arms in the front is it just slightly puts you off balance. But if they have a posterior column, dorsal column disease, or they have cerebellar disease, either one of them, it's not going to matter. So here's the classic Romberg sign. Feet together, arms at their side, looking straight ahead, observe them for about 20 seconds or so with their eyes open. Some people will sway just a little bit just because they may have a little proprioceptive stuff because they're older. They may have cervical spondylotic myelopathy that's kind of weak, but they may sway just a whisker, but their eyes are open so they have a visual reference. Then you have them close their eyes, they lose that visual reference. And now, because their proprioception is not good, their feet are not talking to their head, and so they don't know where they are in space, the classic thing is they'll fall. I've never seen a single patient fall. So, but when you do it in part 4, you are supposed to, can you come up here and face your pals? You're supposed to do this number. I'm standing behind you with my arms to the side, as though you're going to catch them, right? But in reality, thank you. Reality, what's going to happen is they're going to be okay like this with posterior column disease. But when they close their eyes and lose that visual reference, they're going to go, and then they're going to step, and their eyes are going to pop open. They're not going to go boom like a tree cut down in Seattle. I'm sure it's happened. I've just, it's like little green men. I've heard about them. I've just never seen one. So here's the thing. You got to do this though, because that is on the rubric in part 4. Was the candidate, I don't remember how they worded it, did the candidate stand near the patient to support them if they fell or something? So do it anyway. But in real life, they're just going to do this. Eyes go open, and that's your answer. Now, what's positive? What's a positive Romberg test? Well, some swaying, excessive swaying. How much is excessive? I can't answer that question for you, but you'll know it when you see it. They'll go from nice to this. Maybe if they were gymnasts or ballerinas, they will be able to not take that step. They'll fight it with all their worth, but they'll do enough. It'll be obvious to you. Now, a cerebellar patient, on the other hand, they're already unsteady. Feet together, arms at their side, yikes. That's already uncomfortable. And so they're going to sway with their eyes open. They might even take the step that ends the test. But with their eyes closed, they're the one that might fall. Again, I've never had it happen. I've had some organic brain disorder patients come in, but I did not do Romberg with them. they have cerebellar ataxia, you really don't want to make things worse and find out whether or not you are nimble enough to catch a falling patient. That's from the trenches, that's not from the textbooks, okay? So this is something you tell the patients to do. So some of these guys over here, they're going, oh man, chronic alcoholism, what a bummer. I'm gonna check my balance. No, it's a joke. I do this every class. Some people get it, some people don't. But anyway, the idea is chronic alcoholism is one of the causes of cerebellar disease. But older patients that might have had a cerebellar infarct or posterior circulation stroke or whatever, they're going to be obvious to you. And well, we'll just leave it at that. We'll get more into that in 7. So it has nothing to do with the cerebellum. So now we're going to talk about Rust sign. I put this in here because it showed up on one of the Part 4 exams. And you'll see variants of this in your office. Now, there's the Rust sign that the patient does automatically, and it is scary to see when when your staff comes back and says, Dr. Priest, there's a new patient that was in an accident, because they have the patient's paperwork and they're waiting to bring them back. I just want you to know, heads up, there's a patient in the waiting room holding their head up. The reason they're doing that is because the weight of the head, 10 or 12 pounds in an adult human head, if they have a severe injury, especially a fracture, they can't even stand the weight of their head. So they'll hold their head up. Now, it can happen and it does happen with severe sprains as well. And sometimes they don't do it in the waiting room. When they get up off the table, they'll kind of help their neck up. So I got in the habit, like the first year in practice, of when I treat a patient, would you mind laying on your back here for me? And I'll show you kind of how I get patients up off the table. Can I reach under your neck? I like to have the patient grab the back of my arm, and I say, let me lift you, okay? And I do this for them, and they get off the table. So I just got in the habit of, you can see why it's a little easier than if your neck was really messed up. You'd have to lift that first few inches. You can have kind of a over-interpreted Rust sign. But here's why I think this is important for you to know, because Dr. Evans, who is the seminal textbook for the boards for the ortho part, he has noted that when the Rust sign is present, it's never been known to be present in a trivial or unimportant condition. So, if you see it, what do? Well, what I would do is if I have a patient holding their head in the waiting room, which is rare, but what we do is we put them in a collar and we take a lateral film. Philly collars are radiolucent, so you can x-ray right through the collar. Protect them first, ask questions later. Because remember, we've had broken necks in the office. Remember I told you about the hangman's fracture. So here's what it looks like. This is much more common. So you can mitigate that by just helping your patient up. But this is the one, if you see that in your waiting room, they should be in a collar. And I got rid of my x-ray machine. I used to have an x-ray machine and a video fluoroscopy unit and all that fancy pants stuff. I got so tired of having to service it and all that. I got rid of it and I just worked with imaging centers. I sent people out for x-rays. So if you have an x-ray system, take your lateral cervical view. Because that's where 95% of pathology will be seen. Same with an MRI, mid-sagittal cervical or thoracic or lumbar study. That's where T2 weighted in MRI, by the way. That's where 95% of the stuff's going to show up. But if you don't have an x-ray unit, you have to talk to the patient. And then you have to decide whether to have them transported. And we only had one transported, and that was our hangman's fracture. glad we did. Because you don't want to have them drive, did I tell you about her driving down from Kansas, got in a collision there? I didn't tell you about this patient? I thought I did. You interested? So anyway, this was a patient, she and her husband used to come in, and were regular patients, and they went on a trip to Kansas, a car trip, to visit family, I guess. They got in a collision, a front-end collision while they were in Kansas. She was a front seat passenger, and she says she was wearing her seatbelt, but you know, I don't know what happened was the front-end collision, she got thrown forward and her forehead hit the rear view mirror, and she had that classic forceful hyperextension of her neck. So it's irrelevant to me whether she did or she didn't. But she hit her forehead somehow on, maybe the seatbelt failed, that happens. Maybe she rolled around it, that happens. Of course, it would have been rolling this way. So, you know, however it happened, it happened. But anyway, she went to a major hospital where she was in Kansas. They x-rayed her and told her that she just had a bad sprain. Go see your doctor when you get back to Melbourne. They got a rental car and drove back to Melbourne. We did not have access to her x-rays at that time. Obviously, I wasn't on the PACS system of the hospital in Kansas. So we did something we'd never done before or since. We re-x-rayed her, looked at it, something wasn't right. The doctor I was working with said, Greg, can you come in and take a look at this? And I looked at it and I said, I don't think I'm seeing what I'm seeing. So we collimated down, did it again. And sure enough, there was her C2 traumatic spondylolisthesis in all its glory. Unequivocal. And how on earth, where is the diaphragm innervated, folks? What is C3, 4, 5 keeps the diaphragm alive? A C2 fracture? What happens if she steps off a curb wrong, coughs, sneezes, trips, cuts her cord at that level? She turns blue and then it's out of our hands. So that, anyway, I had a radiologist patient and the neurosurgeon whose wife was on my TV show. Called them both. The radiologist got her right in. I warned him, got her in, and at that time they were doing CTs. So they did it, well, they still do CTs, but they got her in for a stat CT, confirmed this, and the neurosurgeon put her in a halo. And she did well. I wish I had those films. I would have written a case report on her, but I don't. But that started referrals from that neurosurgeon to me. Anyway, it was scary. That's a once in a career thing, if ever. Usually people with hangman's fractures don't drive down from Kansas, first of all. Secondly, they're not missed. Thirdly, driving down from Kansas, if they'd have hit a pothole, she wouldn't have made it home. So many things happened in her favor. And as far as I know, she didn't have a vindictive bone in her body, and as far as I know, she never sued. She was just happy to be okay. She healed up fine. They haloed her, you know, where they put holes in you and they put a metal frame around you so you can't move, and she healed up. So yeah, you talk about, and I was probably 4 or 5 years into practice when this happened. So you talk about pucker factor. But it ended well. Now imagine OTOH. See, I'm learning the lingo on texting. OTOH, LOL, TTYL. I'm learning it.
On the other hand,
I can't even do the emoji.
I'm just guessing. I'm just guessing.
But on the other hand,
Oh.
and my daughter would
Getting
say,
hip.
you can't be much older than her.
Watch
But
out.
anyway, she laughs at me. Dad, quit trying to be cool, she says. So I do it just to make her mad at me. But anyway, no, it's a joke with us. But she's my youngest, and she's, you know, let's just face it, the youngest gets treated differently. She has privileges the others didn't have. But anyway, so back to the story. I forget what I was going to tell you now. You guys are taking me off on rabbit trails.
OTOH.
Oh yeah. On the other hand, let's say I OTOH. I put her on the table and said, I got you, ma'am. I know ya, I got ya. The next day, the newspaper would have said in bold headlines, Melbourne chiropractor kills patient. It would have been my fault. So sometimes there's just like a hand reaching down and thumping you on top of the head saying,
Hold on.
stop,
Yep.
pay attention, make people wait. You gotta get this taken care of. Because I had to drop everything. My colleague went on about business, but I kinda had to take over. And I had to make phone calls and arrange for pickup and all that stuff. So, but I was worried. I was worried, not for me, I was worried for her. She made it all the way down to Kansas. What happens if they don't use proper C-spine precautions and she dies in the ambulance? How am I gonna, that would have been horrible. And this was a sweet lady. Her husband and both, she and her husband were just sweet human beings. But anyway, it ended well. All's well that ends well. That is the rust sign. And that's why I say, go out, spend $30. I know I'm over time. Give me 3 more minutes and then you have a break. Is that okay? So go out and spend $30 on Amazon. Get yourself a Philly collar. This is for a trach in case they have to do emergency trach. But there are different types. Just get a Philadelphia collar, it's called. Inexpensive, just get one. I had one in each treatment room because, that'll wake you up in a hurry. So I said, I'm not taking any chances. But just get her in a Philly collar and get your patient a Philly collar or have a Philly collar in case you need it. It's better to need it and not have it than have it and not need it. We had an AED for decades. I only had to hook one patient up. And I was glad I did. Yes, ma'am?
So, I know you had people on staff to go to and everything, we're just by ourselves or something, you're just gonna call 911 and get somebody there?
Well, we left some steps out.
Okay.
First thing I'm gonna do, hopefully you have one other person. Because the first thing you're gonna wanna do is you're gonna wanna hold that patient's head.
Right, and then I guess, like after I do.
Mary called 911. And hold the head. Just right there, hold the head. Lay him down, just hold the head. That's what I would recommend. But if you don't have anybody there, you have to tell the patient, ma'am, you have a broken neck, it's dangerous, potentially life-threatening, do not move. You just have to do it, and then you call 911, and then you come right back and you hold the head. You tell the people when you call, the front door is open, come in, I am holding the patient's head. I mean, it's just that big a deal. I know she drove down from Kansas with her husband, but I don't care. I don't want her dying in my office. I don't want her dying at all.
Right,
So I know what to do, why not do it? Does that answer your question?
yeah.
Good. Yeah, I can't imagine being in a room with a patient and nobody else to talk to. I'm sure it can happen. I mean, so that's a valid question. What do you do? What do you do first? But, that's not a time to soft pedal what's wrong with the patient. Ma'am, you have a broken neck. You don't say you have a traumatic spondylolisthesis of C2. I know you wouldn't, but I'm just illustrating the absurd with the absurd. Ma'am, you have a broken neck. It's potentially life-threatening. I have to call 911. I don't have anybody here. Do not move.
Do you understand that?
Yeah,
Yeah.
you understand me.
Yeah.
I mean, I wouldn't have probably done that because I knew her. She was the kind of person that you would be passively friendly toward. There's passive, friendly, kind, firm, and matter of fact. If I would have told her to eat broken glass, she would have said, well, thank you. May I have more? She was just so
Aw.
sweet, so kind. So I didn't, but her husband happened to be there too, because they were inseparable. I was a little more worried about him than her, frankly. She was suffering, but, and I don't remember if we had a Philly collar at that time, or I think we may have just had a soft collar. So if I told you we put her in a Philly collar then, I don't think that's true. I think we tried to put her in a soft collar, just to take some weight off the head. So, but believe me, I got Philly collars. Dirt cheap. Yeah, but rust sign, never been observed in conditions of minor consequence. Most of the time when you see this, it's going to just be a bad bad sprain, a car wreck with a bad sprain. But we can't assume things, because assuming, you know, the old saying, and it's not appropriate to say, it's not professional, but we all know it the same. And I assumed about that patient with viral meningitis. I am so glad I didn't end up in the Florida Today newspaper the next day, making my whole profession look bad, and I probably have become a plumber, frankly. I probably just say, NCMIC, I'll sign the check, and gave up my license. I don't know that I could have lived with myself missing something like that. I have no idea how a board-certified radiologist at a major metropolitan hospital could have missed that, but they did. They did. Nobody's perfect. That was just a really bad day for that radiologist. That never came up again, thankfully. All right, so we're gonna stop there, take a break, and come back at 10 after